and welcome. This is Michelle Marchant Johnson, and I'm super excited today because one of my favorite returning guests is back with us, and that is the wonderful Mark Rosenfeld from the land down under. Hey.
Oh, you're far too kind to me. Thank you for having me. It's brilliant to be back.
So happy to have you back. I know you have a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience and a point of view that is really valuable to so many women. So
thank you. It's a pleasure to be back and to talk to you again.
Thank you so much, Mark. So before we get started, Mark, I know so many of the ladies are aware of you and your work. I know you have this massive, amazing YouTube channel, which, you know, I want to be you someday when I grow up on YouTube. But I know that there may be some listening who may not be familiar yet. So we'll just do a little brief introduction, and then we'll get into talking about something that I think is really important, and that comes up a lot, and that's boundaries in dating and in relationships.
Yeah, so I started out on my journey about 10 years back with, it's almost probably 11 years now, it's a bit scary, with my own social anxiety. So it took me a long time to work through that. I had to go into a lot of my own anxieties and do a lot of self-work and become very good at rewarding myself and validating myself for that, because at the time there wasn't many other people to do it for me. And throughout that time, I then got comfortable with that and started coaching men. And about 4 years ago, I opened Making Yours, basically, and started coaching women. And it's been so beautiful, the response. It's just been really uptaken by women around the world. And I've been feel so fortunate for the people that have come to me and the people I've met and what I continue to do and hopefully I'm able to do for many decades to come. So that's kind of been my journey in a very brief nutshell of how I got here today.
Yeah, and so when I see you, and I think I told you this the last time we met, Mark, I just see you as being like this really confident, amazing person who, you know, you do this rockin' YouTube channel. You seem very friendly in the way you interact with people.
Thank you.
So it's hard to imagine that you had social anxiety. It's just hard to imagine.
People always say that, and I always say, you know, I'm still an introvert to this day. The easiest, you know, I've spent today here, we've been doing some live streams, and I've worked with a couple of clients. Otherwise, I've been chilling with my cat. So, you know, I'm still very much that person who recharges from being alone. It's just that, like many of my introverted clients, we work to get them working on their social skills, getting their confidence, and then validating themselves for doing that and basically living on their own terms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm an introvert myself, which, you know, in our business where we're putting ourselves and our work out into the world, sometimes that seems like kind of a contradiction, but I can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah.
Now, and I think those of us who do this kind of work, we've all kind of had our own journeys that have brought us to this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Mark, let's dive into this topic of boundaries, because this is it's a buzzword, right? We hear it a lot. We hear a lot of people say you've got to have strong boundaries. But first of all, before we talk about why it's important and how it applies in dating and relationships, tell me what your definition of boundaries actually even is.
I think of boundaries as somewhat like owning a house. It's knowing what you're responsible for and what you're not, and then being able to basically have the fence there when you need it and be able to literally just look after your thing. And, you know, we sometimes, and we'll get into this more, you know, when we have a really good neighbor that we don't want to move out, it can be tempting to let them use our pool whenever they want, as kind of an example. And that's how boundaries start to falter, is we kind of, through fear of loss, we kind of get blurry on where exactly those fences are, and kind of, is this our property, or kind of letting someone in here? Oh, but I don't want him to move out. So there's that. And then there's the inability to let others look after their own property, and kind of expanding your boundaries, almost pushing your fence into their land when actually that's theirs to take responsibility for, which is a tremendous weight off your shoulders when you do that, because instead of having your property in like 6 different people's things, you suddenly realize, actually, I don't have to carry all that weight. I can just look after my thing and let them do them.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting that you made that point about us letting ourselves take responsibility for other people's stuff, because that's not how I
That's
think most
huge.
people typically think about boundaries. But
Yeah.
that might show up as like us trying to control someone else, like in a relationship, or feeling responsible for the stuff that they're not handling in their own life. Is that is kind of what you
Yeah, exactly. Let me give you an example from my own life a few years back. There was a period, and my coach called me out on this. There was a period where I said, oh, I stopped talking to this person, and I just sort of ended things because I didn't want to have to tell her that I wanted to see other people, that I wanted to keep things casual. So I ended things. And he said, well, why'd you do that? And I said, oh, I didn't want to hurt her. And he said, well, why are you treating her like a child? Why are you taking responsibility for her emotions that she is in control of? And, my coach called me out on it, and it was a very good point. I was treating her as though she wasn't capable of handling that, and then pulling myself back to try to look after her feelings. And I was making that decision for her, and I had part of my yard, kind of pushed out into hers, when the more honest and authentic me would have said, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is how I want to live my life. And what you can leave my life if you want, or we can keep talking, but that's for you to decide. I was making decisions for her with the excuse of protecting her feelings, when what I really needed to do was pull my shit out of her yard and not take responsibility for something that I'm not her dad, that I'm not frankly responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
Us
Yeah,
empaths do this a lot.
yeah, this is a really interesting way of looking at boundaries, because I think people, when they think about boundaries, tend to think of it as a little bit more narrow most of the time. More like, I have to be able to have my fence up where it's needed to protect me from other people. But the way you're talking about it here is an additional, like, side of this whole boundary thing that I think we may not think about that often. It's really quite fascinating.
It's both. It's both. It's not just, as you say, allowing people to not swim in your pool whenever they like.
Right.
It's also not not leaving your wheelbarrow in their yard. It's both.
Mm-hmm. And I think this maybe comes into play where women might feel like, well, like you said, you gave the example of you didn't want to hurt this woman. So you just kind
Yeah,
of ended it instead of having a conversation around, I like to keep it more casual, and letting her make the decision whether she wanted to stay.
exactly. Exactly. I robbed her of that and tried to put my stuff in other people's areas, when you can't do that. All you can do is live authentically for you, and then let other people decide how that makes them feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so powerful. I mean, if we could do that in our relationships, that one thing alone, imagine how that could transform things.
Yeah, and we do, women in particular, because you look at, and certainly from the science I've read and from the effects of estrogen from as young as 6 months old, women do tend to have more, what are they, mirror neurons, where they're better at sensing and reading people, and that can also mean empathy, sensing the way another is feeling. So we become very conscious of our movements and how it affects others. And, there was another example from a client recently where basically a woman left the job and then tried to come back in a very casual 2-day a week role. This is a workmate of my clients.
Mm-hmm.
And my client basically said, you know what, I'm not okay with that, because it means I'm doing twice the work now. So if she wants to come back, I want her back in a full-time role or not at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman who tried to come back didn't end up getting the job. And then my client started to feel bad, right? She started to feel like, oh, I feel guilty. I've made this person feel bad. I've done this that's made her feel bad. And I had to realign her. I said, no, you didn't do this out of malice. You didn't set out to make her feel bad. You just had a boundary. You weren't going to accept twice the workload. You put that boundary in place. And then she is responsible for her end. If she gets pissed off at that, that's her responsibility, not yours. You just do you. That's her yard. Don't be worrying about that. You look after your yard, which you did. And suddenly she stopped feeling guilty. That weight was off because she's like, oh, I'm not actually responsible for her feeling bad. I don't have to take responsibility. I'm just responsible for me and my boundaries. And then the guilt was gone. She stopped taking responsibility for that.
Yeah, this is so powerful. So what are some of the common ways, Mark, that you see women getting their boundaries blurred, if you will, especially when it comes to relationships with men or in dating men?
So I think one of the big ones is kind of what we've been talking about, is that we tend to tiptoe around the world, or some women will tiptoe around the world. They're kind of the nice girl, doesn't want to upset people. Women often aren't raised to be as confident, and some would even argue biologically to be as confident with confrontation because of safety reasons, etc. Whether you believe that or not, there's a lot of women who aren't, a lot of people, but especially a lot of women who aren't comfortable with confrontation. And so when it comes to making a movement that is a boundary for you, but which you know will likely upset someone, that becomes hard to do. A very simple example might be, if what's a good one? If you're not interested in a man, simply saying, oh, I have a boyfriend, and making up a lie, or ghosting, right? Instead of being able to say, oh, I'm not really feeling it. Like the attraction just wasn't there for me. It might be an inability to give someone feedback. It could be any sort of thing where you go, oh, that's what I want to do. That's the thing I would do. And then you find yourself hesitating because of a fear. So because of not wanting to affect someone else's feelings in that way. What's another example? Let's say that you can even take a former partner of mine, right? So I was dancing at the time, so stripping. And eventually that became a boundary for her. She said, nope, I don't want to do this. And as in, I don't want to be dating someone who does this. And I said, okay, well, this is a boundary of mine in that we can try to find a win-win. At the same time, I'm not going to quit the job because this is a thing for me. And there would have been that temptation there for her to settle, right? Which is to go, oh, you know what? He's a great guy and I don't want the neighbors to move out kind of thing. And there's that big temptation, if you're not that confident within yourself, to bend that boundary and to kind of accept a bit less. Or the first time, say, a man gets physical and you excuse it, that could be a bent boundary where you go, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to call this out. So any inability to have the difficult conversations that need to be had, and you kind of end up bending that boundary inwards as a result. It can be literally anything in a relationship. So many examples flooding through my mind. It's anything where you don't want to do the thing you need to do for fear of either that neighbor moving out or fear of that person's reaction.
Yeah. And I just thought it could also be doing things that you think the other person wants you to do, even if you don't feel ready to do them. So like maybe having sex before you're ready.
Having sex is great. Having sex is a great example. Yeah. Which is, oh, actually, I don't want to do this, so I'm ready. And then you worry, well, what if he loses interest? And you kind of bend that boundary for him rather than just saying, he can be pissed off, he can respect me, he can do whatever he wants. My thing is I'm not going to have sex with him tonight. And you just then let bygones be bygones and let the chips fall where they may. That's good boundary setting.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. The temptation is to bend because you want the result, or et cetera, as we've talked about.
Yeah. It's a different form maybe of taking that responsibility for someone else's feelings. You're feeling and taking an assumption that this is what has to happen in order for this relationship to continue or go on.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you're
very common.
Yeah, you're over there weeding the neighbor's flower garden, right?
Yeah, another example from a recent client. She was quite young when she was with her first partner, 17, and she became very infatuated with the way the guy was popular. Basically, he was the popular guy. He was the outstanding karate guy, and she just loved this, right? This idea. And so they got together, and then eventually his treatment of her started to go down after a couple of years, and her infatuation with the popular guy led to her weakening on these standards that she knew she had, which was like her individuality, the way she wanted to be treated, et cetera, et cetera. Again, same metaphor, because she didn't want the neighbors to move out. She started letting that fence bend in without pushing back, because she pushes back, she knows there's a risk of loss there. or
Mm-hmm.
she feels it at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's going, oh no, I just won't push the fence because then the neighbors might move out. And that was how she eroded her confidence throughout a 4-year relationship that turned quite bad. And by the way, once you do that, the more you do it in a relationship, she then went into her next relationship and had even less confidence because she wasn't assertive with those boundaries. And you have to retrain the ability to put the fence back up and push back.
Mm-hmm.
It's costing, what did I say? I said something like, selling your boundaries costs you confidence or something along those lines. You're literally charging out your own self-esteem because you're weakening those boundaries for what you truly want. And it erodes you and it makes you less capable and unfortunately less attractive in terms of meeting great people in the future too. Because men do respect women who can do this well.
Yeah, so having boundaries takes confidence because you have to be confident enough to be able to say, hey, you know what? Whatever this person does, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is what I believe. This is what's right for me. Take it or leave it. Take me or leave me. But this is what's right for me. So it takes that confidence to have boundaries.
Well, that's the hard part is confidence is built. No one starts confident, right? Sometimes if we've had a certain type of upbringing, we might have a natural knack for it. If you take any skill, which boundary setting is just another skill, if you take public speaking, if you take kicking a football, no one starts 100% confident. You have to kind of go into that anxiety, try it, and then realize you can actually put up the fence, and then you put another paling in. And so sometimes I always think of confidence as something you earn rather than something you do. And the better you get, even just little ways you start doing this, people at work, that example of, I have one client who was just working way too hard at work. And I said, you've got no boundaries. Your bosses are using you. And she finally said, bosses, I don't have enough budget to do this job. I'm here from 9 to 5 and that's it. I'm not staying late. And of course the bosses respect her more, right? Ironically, now she has more confidence because she pushed back on the fence. So she's put up another paling. So she's earned that confidence now. And weirdly, everyone respects her more, even though she's doing less work now because she has real boundaries now. And that it's a flow-on effect. The more you weaken your boundaries, the less confident you are. And the more you start to put them back up again, the more it snowballs in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it takes confidence to have boundaries, but it builds your confidence as you strengthen them.
Yeah.
It depletes your confidence if you let them collapse.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. So you've kind of alluded to this already, Mark, but I've heard men say, and I've heard even perhaps even webcasts that people have done titled things like boundaries are sexy. And I think boundaries are sexy, but I want you to tell us why you think they're sexy.
Why are boundaries sexy? I think it's because you really feel like she can put you in your place. And she can be that equal. And when someone bends on what they want, you don't get a solid sense of self from that person. And you feel like that person's got you up on a pedestal because they don't want you to move out so much. They let you push fences around. And when they're willing to lose you, you realize that they don't need you. And it's them not needing you that makes you want to keep coming back because they do have they can put you in your place. They see themselves as an equal. And it's really attractive. That's what men are looking for. It's not, by the way, and you will meet women who have such high walls that the moment something happens, they go, "No, if you dub, you're out of my life."
Mm-hmm.
It's not jumping out of the thing the very first time. It's the ability to walk away when you know that those boundaries are not being met, even though you may not want to. It's not the snap fear driving it. It's if anything, it's vulnerability driving it, where you go, actually, you know what, this is a boundary of mine. I'm letting you know, take it or leave it. What's it going to be? It's not fear driven. It's vulnerability driven, essentially.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that, I think it's sexy too, because then a man knows where he stands with this woman. It might invite him up to a different level in how he treats her and how much respect he shows for her, and kind of invite him into a better, more it invites him to be a better man, to use sort of a cliche kind of phrase there.
It really does. It just forces him to step up, and it really makes it makes you feel like you're looking at an equal who isn't afraid to lose you. And when someone's not afraid to lose you, that tells you that essentially they can live on their own, and you're bringing value to life. You're bringing your value to their life, and they're also bringing it to yours in this reciprocal exchange. And that's just so attractive, as opposed to a pushover. It might feel good for a bit for the male ego, but all it really does, unfortunately, is eventually cost that respect, because that person's not willing to put you in your place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why I feel that it's really important for women to strengthen not only their ability to give, which most women, that muscle is pretty strong already.
It's pretty good, yeah.
But their ability to receive and to be in touch with and know what it is, what they want and what they need. Because what I find, Mark, is that a lot of women are not really connected to what is really right for them and to what their deepest wants and needs really are. So it's hard to establish boundaries or ask for what you really want and need if that is so suppressed and you're out of touch with that. And I think for a lot of women, this shows up in the body. We might call it feminine intuition or a gut feeling. Maybe something feels a little off, or they're feeling a little bit uncomfortable, or they don't feel right about the direction something is going. But I know for myself, I did this at times, and I think for a lot of women, it's easy to suppress that, ignore that, pretend it doesn't matter. And so then if that's happening, how can you even begin to express what your wants, needs, preferences are, or establish boundaries?
Yeah, so you're saying basically their own needs, the needs are being suppressed, they're not identifying with them, and then which unfortunately is what's taught to a lot of young women, is that the relationship is kind of the kingpin, that's the big thing, and their needs get sacrificed in exchange for keeping the kingpin. Which, as we talked about, eventually erodes confidence. And it's usually, 10 years later, they come to me and we've got a history of eroding boundaries that we've got to rebuild from.
Yeah, and not only that, that's when they tend to start doing this overgiving because they feel like they have to do that in order to keep a relationship or keep a man. And then they become even more out of touch with it. And it usually has the opposite effect of what's intended anyway. Because then the man starts thinking, well, this person, even if he's not consciously thinking this, he can sense that she may not really respect herself. So why should he respect her?
Yeah. Yeah. And you teach people how to treat you. Mm-hmm. You really do. And so if you are giving to someone, and I literally just did a live stream on this where I talked about, the feminine brings such amazing things to a man's life. And I recently did a feminine energy workshop where, the women were healing their wounds with the masculine, and we were there as the representatives of that. And one of the questions we had to do with our then partners at the time was, what do you appreciate about the masculine? What do you appreciate about the feminine? And a lot of women, and whether it's because of the way they were brought up or the type of parent models they had or the beliefs about the way a relationship should look, I find they give away this feminine, this giving, this empathy, all these supportive things, and they don't really realize what a gift that is. Or if they do, they don't treat it like that because they're not willing to take it away from men who are using it or who are taking advantage of it. And when you really understand the gift that you bring, and that other men will be there who will want that gift, if this one's not willing to reciprocate that, you stop feeling like you need to give and qualify. And as you very well point out, you become a better receiver too. And you're allowed to, hey, I do have my own needs. I'm going to put these in place. And my beautiful energy that I bring to your life does deserve reciprocation. And if you stop that, I'm willing to let you walk away and find someone who does appreciate that gift.
Mm-hmm. So in speaking about these feminine gifts and what women bring to a relationship, and since you just had an event around this, Share with us, if you will, Mark, some of the things, because I think the women would really love to hear this from the male perspective, some of the things that you think women bring that we may not recognize or know should be valued more than we might. We might be taking them for granted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the big one is you look at the way men connect, and there's all sorts of evidence to show how men put previous relationships up on a pedestal, and they tend to think better of their exes than vice versa. So why is that? And when you look at what's happening, you know, men throughout their lives might have 3, 4, 5 people, almost always girlfriends or partners, who they can really open up and be vulnerable with and be emotional with. It's very rare for most men. Most men could count it on one hand, the number of people they have like that. You as a woman probably have conversations like that with, you know, 5 people right now in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big one just to begin with, is that vulnerability, that empathy. A lot of men, particularly, and men not establishing their own feminine energies is kind of another conversation. But you bring a beautiful, empathic, supportive, vulnerable, giving energy to his life that he's not going to get from his buddy Steve. That's a fact. And you might even be sitting at home going, oh, well, you know, any woman can bring that, but no woman's going to bring it in quite the way you can. Your past experiences, whether you had the quote unquote perfect upbringing, or whether you had, like a woman I was talking to recently, a really awful upbringing with absent parents and an abusive sister, you have something unique that your experiences bring to you and allow you to share that empathy, vulnerability, compassion, whatever it is, with a man. And so when you, and gone a little bit off the topic of boundaries here, but when you really understand that and appreciate that, you're not going to feel like you have to qualify yourself and give all the time. You're going to understand the gift that is, and be comfortable receiving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that women, we may not even recognize or might take for granted, because that's just part of who we are. What a gift that is to a man. But I think what you're saying is really true, because as you know, Mark, I've done several of these man panels where I've interviewed men. And that's something that several men, what you just said there, although you said it in a slightly different way, a variation of that is something that a lot of men have shared with me. It's like they've said with their buddies, you know, it's like, hey, dude, you know, they might be slapping each other on the back and that sort of thing. But for the most part, they're not connecting on that really deep level, or like you said, in a really vulnerable way.
You don't get that softness, and you don't get that compassion. And you will sometimes see, you know, there's certain areas in Australia where men will behave this way. It's very not mainstream, though, for men to be that connected with their own feminine. And when there will always be a way that you can bring it out that's going to be different to his, because there's more feminine in the average woman, again, generalizing, than there will be in men. And so, yeah, it's that softness, that compassion. You just, you know, when you go to sleep holding her and you feel that, there's no male equivalent to that, not for a heterosexual man. So really understanding and comprehending that gift is such a big thing, such a big thing.
And that I do think is connected to boundaries, in the sense that if you understand the value that you bring, it allows you to show up knowing your own value a little more deeply, which allows you to be clear that you have value, and you have that, not only that right, but almost a responsibility to be clear about what is right and best for you, and to find the man that matches with, if you will.
Talking about this idea of taking the relationship ideal off the pedestal. And, you know, you and me are in the business of helping people find love, which is really about helping people find happiness. And when a client truly acknowledges that, hey, I am whole, I don't need the relationship ideal to be a full human, I am whole within myself, they start to then realize that the relationship pedestal comes down a notch. And it's like, okay, this is me, I'm a whole human, and I'm not going to barter my boundaries or my confidence in exchange for a relationship. And so other men, and sometimes they're very attractive men, will bugger off, will filter out because they don't have that same appreciation. But a whole man will come to you in that spot, and he's going to respect those boundaries because you have good boundaries yourself, and he can sense that you're able to you're not going to bend that just for the idea of being in a relationship with him. You'll work with him, and this isn't to say if you guys have, you know, boundaries that clash that you can't find a win-win to stay in the relationship together, because that's important too. It's simply to say that you know what your deal breakers are and you know what you bring to the table, and this relationship ideal is not going to have you swaying on that. This comes first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love the way you phrased that, Mark, taking the relationship ideal off the pedestal, the relationship idea off the pedestal, because I do think you're right. I think that's oftentimes when boundaries really get blurred, is when relationship and the idea of a relationship becomes the end-all be-all, to the point that we're willing to compromise our values or principles or let those boundaries collapse.
Exactly. And the client I spoke about earlier is a great example where because he was the popular guy, because she was never popular herself, she had the infatuation over the popular guy. When it came time to put the push back on the fence and potentially lose him, she wasn't able to pull the trigger. And that's because the relationship was on that pedestal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I think that's really profound, a really profound idea there. Now, before we wrap up, I just want to ask you one other thing, if I can, and that is,
of course,
can you model for us what it might sound like? And I know you have all these great YouTube videos, but can you model for us, Mark, what it might sound like in terms of a woman actually expressing a boundary? Because this is another thing that I think comes up for women. They don't want to come across like so harsh. And yet they want to come across strong and clear, right? They don't want to come across like, you know, like a crazy woman, or so harsh that they can't really be heard, or that a man goes, "Don't hurt me." But they want to.
Are we talking dating or relationships?
Yeah, dating and or relationships, however you want to model it. I mean, I would say most of the women here are single, maybe dating, and are seeking a relationship. So I would say more earlier stages than later stages.
More earlier stages. Great. So the big thing is, if you come on too strong initially, you become that person with the massive walls up.
Right.
And really the real skill here is to be able to have boundaries in a relaxed way. I heard a great quote, which I'd never heard before, which is, the person who speaks the loudest is the one losing the argument. I thought that was a really interesting quote about boundaries and confidence. Let's take a simple one. Let's take sex on the first date. And so the guy is going for it, and he's maybe touching up, he's going down the chest or whatever. There's basically 3 levels of boundary setting. And when you're not very confident in boundaries, you tend to jump straight to level 3, which is serious, which puts men off. And the reason it puts men off is because it communicates a lack of confidence in your ability, well, basically your ability to set boundaries. Because if you have to jump to a giant brick wall, it says that you're not very good at actually being permeable and letting the walls down. You know, having those vulnerable connections too, and basically being confident in easy boundary setting. So if you want to be good at boundaries, you start at level 1 and you go playful. And the ability to be playful and put your boundaries in place, playful is relaxed. Okay, I've never seen an animal, a child, whatever, playing and being stressed at the same time. So if you want to get good at relaxed boundaries, get good at putting your boundaries in place playfully. So the man comes along, and maybe he comes up behind you and puts your hand, I don't know, around the chest and starts moving the hand down. That's when you can grab the hand, look at him, give him that cheeky, "Nice try, mister." Hands on chest and a little push away. Okay, so that's your playful. That's your basic. It's cute. It still gets the job done. If he goes forward after that and he doesn't get the playful, you need your level 2, which is your calm confident. So calm confident is your ability to basically, maybe in this case, be hands on his chest. "I told you it's not happening." Okay, you understanding me? Good. Calm confident. You're not being so playful anymore. You're just making it clear where they lie. And then if he still isn't getting it, at this point, he's pretty much a creeper. But if you wanted to go to level 3, you go to serious. "I told you this isn't happening. Do this again, and you're not going to be seeing me again." And that's basically your level of progression. And the better you can put in place boundaries in a quiet, relaxed manner. And I just use the term quiet because, as I say, the person who's the loudest, if you have to jump to shouting, it communicates a lack of confidence in your boundaries. If someone is able to put in place a boundary in a relaxed, a great book for this, Wayne Dyer, Pulling Your Own Strings. Grab that one. If you're able to put your boundaries in place in a relaxed manner and still get the job done, then men will sense how confident you are in basically putting them in their place. You don't need to jump to level 3, and you also don't let your boundaries bend. You have the relaxed confidence that is so rare.
I love it. Thank you so much. That was really, really helpful. And I think that kind of just kind of puts the cherry on top of the whole conversation here. So
yeah, and particularly via text as well. It's easy to jump to serious via text. Don't ever do it. Texting should be light, fun, playful, maybe calm, confident. You should never even need serious over text, because that's often where these conversations come up too. Aim to have these conversations in person, over the phone. If they ever come up over text, keep it light.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip too, because I think texts are so easily misinterpreted. So many
easily.
Communication problems that can happen as a result of trying to have conversations, real conversations over text.
Oh, it's a disaster. You can't have a relationship over text, so don't try. If you're serious enough about a guy to need to put boundaries in place with him, and you still like him even though he's pushing, those boundaries can be done with calm, confident, serious in person. Just keep it light over text, honestly.
So, Mark, before we wrap up tonight, I just really want to thank you for being here and for contributing and for this really important conversation around boundaries. And I want to give you a chance to just give us kind of a last parting thought or word of wisdom or whatever comes to mind.
As final summary. Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think the biggest thing to take away is that you are not responsible for another person's feelings and actions. You are not. You are responsible for your own feelings and your own actions, and that's what is inside the fence. And when you live authentically and when you live in a real way inside that fence, you can certainly find win-win compromises with people. That don't mean you have to bend those boundaries, but essentially you can't be moving them based on others' feelings and actions.
Yeah.
That's what it's really about. It's taking responsibility for what's in your yard and then being willing to take those tools out of other people's yards. So I think the big thing with a lot of us empaths is we need to make sure that we are not protecting people from themselves. Sometimes they need to learn their own lessons, and you are not the feelings police for everyone else. So take that big load off your shoulders and understand all you have to look after is your stuff. And there's lots of ways you can do that without taking responsibility for others' feelings in the process.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, get out of the neighbor's flower bed.
Yeah, stop trampling around in there. It's not your responsibility to save them flowers.
Exactly. So I think we've come full circle here on this, Mark. Thank you so much for joining me. And Mark and I are both sending you lots of love, and we'll see you for more. Kiss, kiss.
My pleasure, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care and talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.